Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and welcome our honored guests, Senator Mark Kirk and Senator John McCain. They are here because Putin's war in Ukraine poses a threat to all free people and countries. It constitutes a direct challenge to international norms governing everything from the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, to unilateral use of force, to territorial integrity and sovereignty of independent nations. Most importantly, Putin's war against Ukraine is a direct threat to the vital national security interests of the United States of America. Putin's war transcends Ukraine. It is a direct challenge to America, to the Euro-Atlantic community, to NATO, and ultimately to U.S. leadership. Therefore, as I invite Senator McCain to speak, I would like to note that he is rightfully considered the most ardent and outspoken supporter of Ukraine anywhere. His commitment to U.S. leadership in helping Ukraine defend itself against Russian aggression and to protect America's national security is second to none. He has been to Ukraine. He has been to Maidan. He has been an outspoken champion for mobilizing congressional support for increasing aid to Ukraine, including providing lethal defensive weapons. And as our Ukrainian American veterans proudly note, he is a true American hero. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you one of the great U.S. national leaders, Senator John McCain.
Thank you. I'd like to say how proud I am to serve in the United States Senate with my friend Mark Kirk, a man of courage who has also served his country in uniform. And he looks to me like he's on the road to recovery and he's doing great. And I can assure you his little bout that he had has not kept him from being one of the most active and important members of the United States Senate. So Mark, I'm very proud. Could I also mention to you that maybe many of you know, I was recently again sanctioned by Vladimir Putin. It means that I can't spend spring break in Siberia again this year. Vladimir Putin refers to me quite often, using most of the four-letter words in the Russian language. I have to tell you one quick story. It was about 2 years ago. I tweeted, "Dear Vlad, the Arab Spring is coming to a neighborhood near you." In return, I got hundreds of tweets in Russian that came back, and obviously I don't know how to read Russian. So I asked a fellow from the Library of Congress to come over and translate some of them for me. That was a mistake. There are no I did not know there were so many words in the Russian language that entailed different types of intercourse. So when the tweets in Russian come back, I don't get them translated anymore. But you know, my dear friends, this didn't have to happen. If we had, back at the time of the Orange Revolution, if we had moved forward then to make Ukraine part of NATO, which many of us wanted to happen, if we had told Vladimir Putin that if he violated the Budapest Agreement, I know I insult many of your intelligence when I remind you of these things. The Budapest Agreement, in return for Ukraine giving up its nuclear weapons inventory, guaranteed the territorial integrity of Ukraine, specifically including Crimea. And Vladimir Putin, of course, has broken that agreement. And the shame of it all is that we have stood by and watched. And when other nations have nuclear weapons, how do you think they will react to requests for them to get rid of their nuclear weapons when they see what has happened in Ukraine? So this is not only important about breaking their word to Ukraine, it's about the validity of any commitment when we try to combat the spread of nuclear weapons. And Vladimir Putin has reverted, he and Lavrov have reverted to the old rhetoric of the Soviet Union as well. You remember right after Crimea and Vladimir Putin said, well, those aren't Russian troops, that they can get uniforms from local stores. That's the old kind of Soviet Union rhetoric, that blatant lies that everybody knows they're lying, but they don't care. And of course, Vladimir Putin continues to now threaten the other nations. What do I worry about? I worry that the next may be Mariupol. He is already moving troops and equipment into eastern Ukraine. Every time that Vladimir Putin makes a move, our European friends and this President of the United States say, you better not do anything else. Does anybody remember Crimea? Does anybody remember the shoot down of a Malaysian airliner that was clearly a Russian equipment? Does anybody remember Donetsk now? Are they going to forget if he goes to Mariupol? Are they going to forget if he moves across southern Ukraine to Moldova, where there's 1,400 Russian peacekeepers? Peacekeepers, I use that word loosely. And what about my Lithuanian, Estonian, and Latvian friends who are here, whose Russian-speaking peoples are subjected to a barrage of Russian propaganda 24/7? And the question, too, is, what if Vladimir Putin decided to take a couple of provinces in Russian-speaking provinces in one of these countries? What would NATO do? I think it's a legitimate question. So I stand before you not as a Republican, not as a Democrat, but I stand before you as a man who loves your country, a man who's had the opportunity to see the beauty of its people and the wonder of one of the most beautiful parts of the world. A person who will always remember, as long as I live, I will never forget being at the Maidan. I will never forget 200 or 300,000 people in the freezing cold, many of them hungry, there because they wanted what so many of us here take for granted. A few months ago, a man named Boris Nemtsov was in my office. And at the end of our conversation, I said to Boris, who I'd gotten to know over many years, I said, I'm afraid for your safety. I'm afraid they may try to kill you. Boris Nemtsov said, I think they will try to kill me, But I have to go back. I have to go back to my country because I want it free of Vladimir Putin and his corruption. And yes, what was Boris Nemtsov about to do? Boris Nemtsov was about to reveal compelling information about Russian involvement in Ukraine, and he was killed for it. Just as those demonstrators were killed in the square, where we still have memorials, as you know, in the Maidan. And now our dear and beloved youth of Ukraine are shedding their blood in defense of freedom and seeking to rid their country of the Russian presence. And I'm embarrassed as I stand in front of you. I'm embarrassed and ashamed that the United States of America will not provide the Ukrainian people the weapons with which to defend themselves. It's shameful. And today, we won't even provide the Ukrainian military with intelligence information, timely intelligence information as to the Russian movements that are taking place, and that is also shameful. Today, the Russians are making use of drones. And if a Ukrainian soldier today sees a drone, he's got about 60 seconds to move because there's an artillery shell coming after it. Can't we, in the name of God, give the Ukrainian people weapons to defend their own sovereign territory? I believe that I know something about the history of your beautiful country. And I know of some of the tragedies that have befallen your beautiful country and their people. During World War II, the movement back and forth across Ukraine was a bloodletting of horrendous proportions. Joseph Stalin's enforcement of collectivization caused the death of thousands. And yet the Ukrainian people had the spirit and the will not only to survive, but to thrive. And the Ukrainian people will not be defeated by Vladimir Putin. The Ukrainian people, with your help and your dedication and your love, they will survive, and someday we will all celebrate a whole, free, democratic Ukraine. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Senator McCain. In preparation for today's meeting, I went through some of my old archives. I pulled out a Chicago Tribune article from 2003, 12 years ago, prior to the Revolution of Dignity and the Maidan, prior to the Orange Revolution. And I want to quote here. This was an article subtitled, "Some Want the Country of Russia Out of the G8." A creeping coup against the forces of democracy and market capitalism in Russia is threatening the foundation of the U.S.-Russia relationship and raising the specter of a new era of cold peace between Washington and Moscow, McCain said on the Senate floor. The United States cannot enjoy a normal relationship, much less a partnership, with a country that increasingly appears to have more in common with its Soviet and Tsarist predecessors than with the modern state Vladimir Putin claims to aspire to build. So thank you, Senator McCain, for your clarity then. Thank you so much for your clarity now, and we certainly look forward to your clarity and leadership in the future. Thank you so much. Like Senator McCain, our following guest needs no lengthy introduction. The Ukrainian community in Illinois is very fortunate to have a strong supporter for our concerns. We are particularly grateful that Senator Kirk has been very interested in Ukrainian issues and has forged a close working relationship with his Senate colleagues in these matters. Since his last appearance with us, Senator Kirk responded to the requests of our community and joined the bipartisan Senate Ukraine Caucus, which was formed last month, and where he serves as vice co-chair. Senator Kirk is also a very strong backer of providing lethal defensive weapons to Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you our very close friend, Senator Mark Kirk.
Thanks, everybody. Let me just say, life is better when you have, life is, for all the young people in this room, life is better if you pick a hero, and my hero is John McCain. So let me get, you guys all know that I like to get down in the weeds, and I talk about doing something. John, I have a unique invitation for you. I've been working with Mick Nicholson, who is the NATO Land Forces Commander, Lieutenant General base, where there's a big exercise called Anaconda 16. We are going to fill the skies of Poland with the U.S. paratroops and U.S. fighter aircraft to show that we are going to stand behind our European allies. John, will you come with me to Anaconda 16? That's good. So we're gonna stand with our troops, and we're going to deploy to Poland to make sure that NATO commitment is backed with boots on the ground to show Putin that we are standing behind European democracy. I think that's the way to do this. Let me criticize our president for a second. We cannot defend Ukrainian sovereignty with Happy Meals and boots. We should take an example from our French allies that sent guns and powder to George Washington to make sure the U.S. Revolution actually succeeded. You can't do this with non-lethal aid. We should send the Ukrainians anti-tank weapons. We should send them offensive, lethal weaponry to make sure that they...
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Kirk, for your strong support, your very moving comments. We appreciate your solid commitment to support Ukraine and appreciate your commitment to defend the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take some questions from the audience, but we please ask that you submit those in written format. A number of you have already filled out some index cards in the past. If you need an index card, please raise your hand, and we'll bring a card to you and have that submitted, and we'll be able to get that taken care of. In the meantime, after our very brief Q&A, because we do have senators on a very tight schedule, we will have a press conference which will take place up in the front here. And we ask the audience to please allow this to proceed uninterrupted, and there may be opportunities for photos after the press conference. Thank you for your cooperation and understanding in this. And now I would like to call Miss Ukrainian Diaspora 2014 and Miss Ukrainian Diaspora 2013 to make a symbolic presentation to our two senators. These are replicas of helmets that were used at the Maidan in order to prevent themselves from the Yanukovych regime aggression. Thank you so much, senators, and thank you, ladies, for the presentations. Senator McCain, thank you very much for the support, your support of Ukraine. What is the level of trust and cooperation between the United States and the Ukrainian government?
I think it's excellent, but I also have to give you some straight talk, my friends. As you know, under Yanukovych, it was a kleptocracy. As you know, the oligarchs controlled the economy to the detriment of average Ukrainian citizens. As you know, there was corruption, that went all the way down to the level of the policeman on the beat who would take bribes. So I'm very happy that Vitaly Klitschko is the mayor of Kiev. I think he's not only a national hero, but he's a man of honor and integrity, and I certainly wouldn't want to fight him. But by the way, there's a big fight coming up on the 25th, as I'm sure that you know. I predict a Klitschko victory. But so we have to have a vigorous anti-corruption drive in Ukraine. We need to have transparency. We need to have frankly, law enforcement has to be cleaned out to a large degree. And certainly, laws have to be passed which outlaws the oligarchies controlling certain segments of the Ukrainian economy. Now, I know that the Prime Minister and the President have been starting on that effort, but that effort has to be completed, because one of the major reasons why Yanukovych was so unpopular was because of the corruption and the damage that he did to the lives of the average Ukrainian citizens.
Thank you. In the global perspective, do you see how the United Nations framework could be improved, or should it be abandoned altogether?
I'll follow Senator McCain's straight talk and say that I don't expect a lot from the United Nations, that they need to live up to their promise. They were created to confront dictatorships collectively. Anybody here think these times are a lot like 1938, when we saw Hitler running wild, creating the foundation for World War II? I think the essential thing is to have a strong United States to confront dictators and force them to back down, to show that with boots on the ground and lethal weapons. My favorite weapon to send to Ukraine would be wire-guided anti-tank missiles, which, if they're built from the United States, they can take out a old Soviet tank from 3,000 yards. It would be great to see that on the battlefield in Ukraine, to see Putin's tanks melt away under fire from.
Thank you.
Let me just, could I just say, my dear friends, again, I have to give you some straight talk. Without American leadership, the Europeans are not going to act with any real decisive action, to say the least. I was in Munich not long ago at a conference, and the Chancellor of Germany said that, well, back when she lived in East Germany, well, we didn't supply weapons. It was nonsense. It was nonsense. And every time I turn around, I see the Europeans trying to find ways to lift the sanctions rather than increase them. Unless the United States steps forward and leads, and all of us shame the Europeans, as long as they're dependent on Russian energy, I can't give you a great deal of optimism.
Thank you. Well, we hear that there isn't much we can count on from the United Nations, but what about the United Kingdom? The UK was one of the 4 signatories to the Budapest Memorandum, and in the interest of world peace, of denuclearization, and global safety, also provided assurances for Ukraine for its territorial integrity and sovereignty. Can the United States do anything to influence the United Kingdom to step up and help in terms of supporting Ukraine against Russian aggression?
We have the most, what we call a special relationship with the British that is unlike in ourselves in any other country, and that is for the obvious reasons that we all know of. Right now, the British are going through a process with their budgeting that they will have the smallest military in their history. They are cutting their defense spending to the point where they will not have the ability to affect events whether they want to or not. Again, I hate to be repetitive, but it keeps coming around to American leadership. America leads. The reason why the 20th century was called the American century is because we led. And when the United States doesn't lead, then it creates a vacuum, whether it be in Ukraine or whether it be in Syria or whether it be in Iraq, or now we are watching the Chinese now become far more aggressive and militaristic, or whether it be in the area of cyber warfare, where we are seeing attacks and capabilities of our adversaries dramatically increasing as well.
Thank you. Senators, do you see the events?
Could I just add
Yes,
one
sir.
thing? I keep telling my dear friends in Arizona, the Ukrainians are not asking for American boots on the ground. Americans don't want to send their young men and women into harm's way. Ukraine is not asking for that. They're not asking. They may want some advisors or trainers, but that's why it's so hard to understand why we won't give them the assistance that they need.
Thank you. Senators, do you see the events in Ukraine with Russia as a regional issue, or are you concerned that Russia has growing influence in other destabilizing areas like North Korea, Syria, or other terrorist-sponsored countries?
I worry now that the Russians feel that they're in a role. They're involved in the Iran talks right now. I think the president has been too weak because he brought them right into the Iran talks. They are not our friend. They're not going to be helpful to us. We should know that. The point here I wanted to make, you cannot free Ukraine with British troops. You should free Ukraine with Ukrainian troops to make sure that they have the weapons to, like Winston Churchill said, give us the tools and we'll finish the job. I think Ukrainian people would finish the job for us with the adequate help, making sure that we could show the entire world that we're standing behind people who wanted to fight for their own freedom against the kleptocracy of Russia. That would be a good way to do it. Yeah.
As I said before, Vladimir Putin, we know, because he said so, wants to restore the Russian Empire. Then the question is, at what cost? The only reason why Russia left Afghanistan many years ago was because there was too many coffins coming home to Russian families. And I believe that he's sitting there now, planning on Mariupol, and then thinking about the next step after that. And he figures profit and loss. And there's no doubt that his economy is in very serious trouble, not because of the sanctions, but because of the price of oil. So if you want to thank somebody, thank Saudi Arabia for their reduction in the price of oil. But have no doubt that the economy in Russia is hurting very badly. Then the question is, what effect does that have on Vladimir Putin? Does it, as it has in times past, inspire him to further aggression to divert the attention of his population? Or does a failing economy cause him to rethink and perhaps pull back? History shows that many times dictators, in order to mask domestic economic difficulties, have embarked on further adventures. I have predicted everything that Vladimir Putin, and I predict Mariupol. I'm not predicting what he will do next after that, because he will then have his land bridge to Crimea, which is his ambition. But I think he then figures profit and loss. And right now, he hasn't really paid a very heavy price, as I'm sure you are aware, for what he's been able to obtain.
Why is the Voice of America still without Russian language radio and TV programs to Russia and Russian-speaking areas of Ukraine and to counter the massive Kremlin propaganda?
I was recently featured in a 10-minute piece on Russia Today, and I can tell you it was not a flattering piece about me. I was guilty of things that I had never imagined, much less been accused of before. But after the end of the then Soviet Union, the United States of America, to a large degree, I'm not saying dismantled, but certainly downscaled our facilities in Prague, Radio Free Europe, Voice of America, those facilities and programs, because as far as we were concerned then, the Cold War was over. Mark and I and Senator Corker and the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee and Lindsey Graham and some of us are working on trying to get the Radio Free Europe back into the business of getting the message out. And as you know, right now, the Russian-speaking propaganda is inundating the Baltics, Poland, Ukraine, and in particular. And the most popular programs that the Russian-speaking people watch on television are even the soap operas. So we've been working very hard to try to get our facilities back up and manned and funded in order to counter the Russian propaganda. And my friends, I would argue to you, it wasn't just our weaponry that won the Cold War. It was our message. And it was one Ronald Reagan that, in the words of Margaret Thatcher, won the Cold War without firing a shot. And one of the reasons why was because he said, Mr. Gorbachev, take down this wall.
Yes, thank you. Recently, it was reported that Secretary of State Hillary Clinton received donations for the Clinton Foundation from Ukrainian oligarchs that were part of the Yanukovych regime. Do you think that had any impact or influence on her foreign policy positions?
I don't. I certainly don't know, nor would I accuse her of such. But as we know, especially if you are in position of responsibility, it's not only what you do, it's what you appear to do. And that's why all of us should be very careful about something like that, because it does open any individual to criticism or scrutiny if they are receiving funds from organizations or countries that may not have very strong reputations. So I am not accusing Secretary Clinton of anything, but I am saying that you have to be careful about appearances.
Thank you very much. Dear Senators, sincere thanks and deep admiration for all your good work on the Ukrainian cause. Congress passed the Ukraine Freedom Support Act of 2014. How can our Congress ensure that our administration executes the will of the people? What can we, as American citizens, do to assist in the efforts of obtaining arms for Ukraine? And how can we show our gratitude for those supporters of Ukraine?
First of all, could I say that there are Ukrainian communities all over this country, not as large as here in Chicago, but they are there in my home state. They are everywhere. And they care a lot. And we have to translate that care and that love and that sorrow into political action. I believe that every single person running for any office in this country, at the federal level anyway, should be asked what their position is and what they intend to do. That is because politicians and elected officials depend on support and votes. So I hope that as you took time out this Sunday morning to spend time with me and Mark, when everybody in this room had something else to do on this Sunday afternoon, you would take some more time and call your friends, and call people that are not in the Ukrainian community, and talk to them about this dismemberment of a nation of Europe for the first time in 70 years. And tell them about the suffering, and tell them about the pain, and marshal their support, and say, tell our elected members of Congress and tell the President of the United States, we need to act, and we need to act now. And if you don't, we'll try and find somebody that will.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for your sincere comments, for the time that you have spent with us, for being so candid and so strong in your support for us. We truly, truly appreciate that. There is a concert next week downtown, and for more information, please stop by outside the entrance, and you'll be able to pick up flyers on that. In addition, our two singers will be going back to Ukraine soon. If anyone is interested in making some donations to support the anti-war efforts, please see Sophia or Marika, and they will be able to assist you in that regard as well. And again, thank you very much, Senator McCain and Senator Kirk, for spending so much time with us. We're now going to start the press conference. God bless America. God bless Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!